Right guys, this lesson is all about doing the pseudocode questions, the writing pseudocode questions from the old hire and from the new hire. Now, what we're going to look at today, now we know that these are the hard questions and I know that some of you don't even attempt these in the exam, so what I'm trying to do today is show you that you can actually pick up marks. You can easily get 3 out of 5, 4 out of 6, even half marks. It's better than you not attempting these questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how you break the questions down and then you build it back up. You should never go straight into writing code. What you should be doing is almost like an analysis, back to the way you did your coursework. Now, I don't know about other teachers in West Lothian, but I like you to go through and underline all of your inputs, your processes and outputs. Well, I want you doing that in the exam when you're doing these questions. You're underlining your inputs, you're underlining your outputs, you're underlining your array. You're then going, right, okay, so how are these going to work? Just exactly the same way you would when you're doing coursework. So here's the problem that we're going to look at today. And the problem is basically a program is required to find the positions of a surname in a list. Now there might be more than one position, and that's important because if you're returning one thing, then it's probably going to be outside of the loop. If you're returning more than one thing, then it's going to be inside the loop. This is the sort of thing you should be thinking about when you're reading the problem. And in the exam, you can be writing that at the side. The marker is going to give you marks, not just if you get it perfect, but if they can actually see you going through the process and just about getting there. Their job is to give you marks. It then says the array used to store the list of surnames is called competitors. So I've got my array name, so I should be writing that down. Use pseudocode or a language of your choice. Show how the user could enter a surname, there's my input, and how the linear search algorithm could be used to find and display the positions of the entered surname. This one tells you you're using a linear search. Now, a lot of them won't actually tell you that, and that's why in the next slide, the first thing that you should do is to write down the type of standard algorithm that this one is. So just write down it's a linear search. You've got a big box, you've got plenty of space, there's loads of blank paper up the back, just put some asterisks in, direct the person to the back, and they'll get you the marks. There's plenty of space to write stuff. So we write down it's a linear search, and then we go on to our next bit and write out the variable and the variables and their array names and state if they're an input, if they're a process, if they're an output, if they're the array. Just put some information down there. This means that you're not constantly having to go back to the scenario. You've written this down, you're going through the process. Think about your coursework. Your coursework in it, if you're doing old hire, then your implementation is probably worth about 8 marks. In new hire, I think it's worth about 10 marks. Now here's the thing, out of 60 you're getting 10 marks, out of 30 you're getting 8 marks. You're not getting, you know, it's a very small number. You're getting marked for the process, going through the process, going through the motions, and that's what you should treat your exam exactly the same. So, and here we go, if you need a variable and it hasn't been explicitly written, then make sure you add it to this list as well. Let's not forget about it. So, we write down, sorry I've went and jumped one. We go back, sorry, I'm looking back at the scenario and we look at what the variables are, but I've already done that. So I've written out competitors, because that's my array. I've put my square brackets at the end so we know it's an array. Remember, if you're doing Visual Basic, if you do your normal parenthesis, you will still get the marks. People are expecting that, the markers are expecting that from the people that do VB. And then we write our surname and we write beside it that it's the input. Now, when we do a for statement, you know and I know that we either use the word counter or we use the word index to give us the position in the array. You want to output the position. Now, I'm not going to set up another variable called position because I want to output all of them. So I'm going to call it either counter or I'm going to call it index. Now, I teach my guys that we use the word counter. Your teacher might have you using index. That's entirely up to you. They mean the same thing. We're talking about the specific element in the array, the position in the array. And I've written down here it's a process and it's a display. So we're getting the position with the loop and then we're displaying it, we're outputting it. So this slide here is more for the new hire. Old hire, you have to write in pseudocode. New hire, you get the choice, code or pseudocode. If you write in code, you cannot make a mistake with your syntax. Again, I know your teachers have went over this with you. Your syntax needs to be absolutely perfect. You cannot forget an end of line. You cannot forget your closed parenthesis. You cannot forget your inverted commas. If you write in pseudocode, as long as what you write does what it's meant to, it makes sense, and each line can be turned into one line of code, then you will get the marks. You do not need to write in Haggis. So for example, an input for Haggis, we have to input the surname. An input for the surname would be receive surname from from keyboard or from user. I don't need to write that. I can quite simply write ask user to enter surname, get the surname, input surname. These all mean exactly the same thing, and you will get the marks for them. So what you need to do is to try and think, what is it I want it to do? It's the same with your display. Your display, send something to display. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't say send surname to display or send whatever it is to display. I would say display surname. It's exactly the same thing, and I'm getting my mark because I know that I can turn that into code. So think about this one, and the advice that we have all given you is that you write in pseudocode. You do not attempt to write in code. So here's the one that's going to be the shock. I don't want you to write it in the correct order. I want you to write the easy stuff first, then write the hard stuff, and then at the end put it into an order. Going to show you how you do that. Every single standard algorithm except your input validation, but remember that was National 5. All your new ones, find min, find max, count occurrence, linear search, they must all follow these steps here. Number 1, initialize the variables, don't initialize the array. Number 2, get your inputs if there's any. Number 3, I want your for statement. 4 is your comparison, so it's your if statement to compare the values. Number 5 is do whatever it is you've got to do. Number 6, please don't miss out your ends. If you miss out an end if or an end for, you lose your marks, because a for statement will not work without an end, and if will not work without an end. So make sure you remember your ends. And then finally, you've got your output. These 7 steps here, you need to work and turn that into some kind of anagram, that you memorise that and you go into the exam and you write it down. Because if you follow this, you will not go wrong. I promise you that. So I'm looking back at my variables and my arrays again. My arrays competitor, surname, and then my counter. I've noticed I've just copied and pasted that exactly the same as before. I'm constantly going back to that. This is why we write it down, because this is what you need to be thinking about. So, the first thing I want to do is to initialize the variables. I don't initialize my array because my array's already been initialized and there's data inside it. I don't have to do that. Unless they tell you to, but we don't have to for this scenario. I don't have to initialize my counter because my counter generally gets initialized inside my for statement. So surname is what I need to initialize. Now surname is a string, so we set it to empty string. If it was an integer, if it was age or something, or total, we would set it to 0, and if it was a floating point, we would set it to 0.00. So set surname to empty string. Now again, if I was writing this and I wasn't writing it in Haggis, I would just write surname equals string. Sorry, surname equals empty string. It's much easier, much faster to write, and you don't have to worry about your keywords. And by the way, these capital letters, you do not have to write them in capital letters either. So I've written it out, set my surname to empty string. Next, hold on to move on to the next slide. Next, we're looking back at this. We've done our initialize. What we want to do next is our inputs. My list before said initialize, then inputs. My input, again, is my surname. So this time I just write receive surname from user. Now remember, you could write input surname. It's exactly the same thing. Try and think, like, if it's an input, just write the word input and then what it is you're inputting. If it's a calculation, just write calculate, whatever it is you're calculating, and then do the calculation. And then if it's an output, you write display and then what it is you're displaying. You can be that simplistic with it. I'm trying to look for a good word here. You can be that simplistic with it. You do not have to go into all this detail with Haggis. So my next one, when I go back, is instead of doing my for statement next, I want to do the output. You see, I've got a mark for doing my input. I've also got a mark for doing my initialize. I'll also get a mark for doing my output. There I've now got 3 out of 5. Guess what? I've now got 3 out of 5. Whereas before I might not have attempted. I might have got to the for statement and went, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to walk away. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to write down my output. And I'm going to say send counter to display. Because that there is me displaying the counter. Now, if you go back up, I've written down counter, which is the position. It's almost like I've given them a bit of a data dictionary so they know what I'm talking about. So the person who's marking can see my thoughts and knows what's going on. So there's me now got another mark. Like I said, I've got 3 out of 5. So I've done my initialize, I've done my inputs, and I've done my output. Now for this one, the output's actually going inside here because I want to output them all. I now need to do my for statement and my if statements. Now the for statement is a little bit tricky. So if we scoot down to the next slide, I've jumped on too many, sorry. If we jump down to the next slide, the for statement's purpose is so that you go through the array. Now there's 2 ways of doing this, and the 2 ways are, let me just pull this back because it's went a wee bit funny. If you know how many elements in the array there are, then you say for counter equals 0 to the maximum number. So if I've got 100, I will say for counter equals 0 to 99. And you only ever use that one when you know the number of elements. If you don't know the number of elements, then what you want to use is for each counter in and then the name of the array. Now here's the thing, the second one can be used for both of these instances. I can use for each counter in competitors when I know there's 100 in them, 100 competitors. So let's forget about this one. Let's just ignore it and let's memorise this. And then all I need to do is change the array name to be the name of the array that I've already worked out. Let me show you what the answer would be. So, for each counter in competitors, bracket, bracket. Now by writing that and by writing my end for, I've got another mark. That shouldn't be too hard for you to memorise. That should be easy for you to memorise. Now I'm sitting with 4 out of 5. And the hardest one is my if statement, and I'll be honest with you and say, you know, if statements are where everybody falls down, they're the bit that's hard, fair enough. But so far we're doing really well. So, we've done 1, we've done 2, we've done 3, we've done 5. No, I didn't do my ends, but I'll put them together and I've done my output. So let's have a look at the if statement. So the if statement is used to find what you're looking for. Now, again, very similar to the for statement, there is a format for writing it. We are looking in our array for something. So we always write if the competitors at counter is equal to, or is greater than, or is less than something. Whatever it is you're looking for. Now this is the same if it's a count occurrence. Because if it's a count occurrence, you're looking to see how many things are equal to something and then you want a run in total. If it's a find max, you're looking for the biggest. So it would be if competitor's counter is greater than the maximum we've already found. Your if statement is the same every single time. So what is it I'm comparing? I'm comparing my array with the surname. So if I move on to the next slide, sorry, that's giving you the syntax. The reason I've given you the syntax is people forget their then. If you forget your then, the marker might take a mark off you because you always have to make sure you've got your then. So if I scoot down, if my competitors at counter is equal to surname, then. That's my line of code. Of course I've got my end if, but that's what I write. So you should be able to get the majority of the if statement. Now that's us finished, guys. That's us actually written that linear search. What you now do is put it together. And to put it together, we look back at the spec, we work out what we have to do. It says we need to display the positions. We've made sure we've written every code, or as much code as we can. And remember to put in your ends. So you write the code in the correct order with the line number in front this time. So when I rewrite it, there's my initialize, there's my input, my for, my if, my do something, there's my two ends, and my do something was to display. And that there would be worth 5 marks in your exam. Now I'm hoping that what you're seeing is you can get your 1 mark, your 2 and your 3 marks for writing those 3 lines. I'm now hoping that you feel confident that you could easily get this 4 line. Maybe you're still going to struggle a little bit with your if, but you'll be able to get that. I'm hoping that what I'm doing is I'm moving you to getting 3 and 4 out of the marks that you get. Thank you.